Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Mingus on Tech. I'm Ken Mingus, Executive News Editor at Computer World. I'm here with Editor-in-Chief Scott Finney, Senior Features Editor Tracy Mayer, who is on our remote capabilities. We're going to be talking about video conferencing, interestingly enough, and digital transformation. A couple of quick house cleaning issues to deal with. If you're looking at us on Facebook Live and you've got a question, feel free to fire away in the comments, and producer Chris here will be able to ask us whatever it is you want to know. We'll see if we can answer it. Also, be aware that Mingus on Tech is now available on iTunes, so you can find us if you want to look at listen to the podcast. Now that we have this remote capability with Tracy in an undisclosed location, we thought it'd be a good chance to talk about video conferencing, which over the last few years has really begun to to pick up steam in the enterprise. Companies, I think, have finally realized that collaboration across great distances is a good thing. And with the technology advancing and prices coming down, more and more companies are turning to video conferencing as a way to basically get more work done cheaper. So, Tracy, there were a couple of stories that you had passed along to us, which I thought were really interesting, that kind of explained how companies are rolling this out. And I wondered if maybe you could just talk for a couple of minutes about the kinds of things that we're seeing, and at some point we'll give you some do's and don'ts on video conferencing.
Yeah, so we did a story, Beth Stackpole did a story for us a while ago that you'd be able to find on our website. The first thing is they said that companies are doing it. The number one thing is reducing travel costs. So the number two thing is increasing productivity, between remote teams, or if your boss is somewhere else, for example. The person I report to is in San Francisco, right? So, we could be Skyping instead of doing conference calls. And then to improve collaboration. So productivity, collaboration, and reducing travel. One thing that's really happened in the last couple of years is that the big enterprises used to have those giant telepresence systems, which they're gorgeous, right?
Right, but they're also very expensive, right?
Yeah, really expensive. You need the separate room. You need, some people who know what they're doing to take care of these things. So I think, they are in a lot of large companies who are doing serious, conferencing with Tokyo or whatever. But now there's a middle layer, and then there was real low end stuff, and we do have a review up of some real, very, very affordable systems, like in the $250 range that you could use for something casual. But now there's this whole middle layer. There's stuff that's software as a service. There's web-based stuff. And so there's now a middle layer where there wasn't before. I think that was one of the big takeaways, is you could get pretty good quality with a lot of ease of use, and you don't have to have separate IT people to set it up for you.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned the ease of use, because in the review I will put a link in the story that goes with this video, there were like 4 different sort of pieces of hardware, camera / microphone combos. And ease of use seemed to be an important point for at least one of them, because you basically set it up, plug it in, turn it on, and within 5 minutes you're ready to go. It doesn't require a lot of IT intervention. You don't have to do a lot of things with cameras and rooms, and And I think that's one of the things that has made video conferencing much more available, not to just big companies, but to, as you say, smaller and medium-sized firms. And it's interesting how quickly that technology seems to be taking off.
Yeah, and I think obviously the web is, the easiest if the quality is a little lower than you're going to get with other systems, but you just log on. And I mean, we're using Skype right now, which was, I have to say, I use Skype on my smartphone, but I hadn't used it on my laptop before. There's no capability to test your webcam in advance, which seems absolutely crazy to me. I mean, I went out and tested on my Mac, but that seems like a big flaw there. So I mean, there's always going to be some setup and stuff like that. But yeah, you're not doing wires and crawling under the desk and all of that kind of stuff, because people just, it's human nature to wait until 2 minutes before you're doing a video call. And then I saw all these panicked messages on the Skype board from like kids who were, doing interviews for college or for an internship. And they were like, it starts in 2 minutes. So, you know,
Yeah,
you
why
need to
plan
get some.
ahead, you know?
Yeah, you turn the thing on, you notice that your laptop has 2% battery. I mean, it's like it's just
Or
you
the
don't
mic
get
doesn't
ready.
work, or that you're not sure
Yeah.
if the camera's. It's interesting that one of the things that in one of the stories that we looked at was this trend that as more and more people are bringing their devices to work, the BYOD trend. Obviously, iPhone, Android phones, people are getting used to doing video at home, whether it's Facebook or Google Hangouts or you know something live. And when they come to work, they want to be able to do the same thing with the same kind of ease of use. And it sounds like the technology, I mean, I suppose you could use your phone, but that might be a bit dicey in an enterprise setting. But I mean, Scott and I were talking earlier. One of the camera audio devices that we reviewed was something that you said you might even want to try out here.
Yeah, the Logitech, $500, stands up 12 inches high, and it pretty much does what we would need if we were having even a staff meeting. And I think if
Yeah,
we
that
were
would be
we
great.
just buy it for $500 and set it up, instead of going through the major production, no IT needed. Of course, we like it when IT is needed, but
Yeah, it's important for IT to be needed. We need
One
IT.
one of those that we reviewed, that was Brian Nadell who was
yes,
reviewing those. One of them had a battery that lasted for a couple of hours, so you could even do some kind of
that's the
remote
one.
That's
stuff.
that's
That's the
Or
exactly the
same
one. So
one.
if you
yeah, that was a cool looking unit. So I mean, yeah, I think the thing is, a lot of companies are going to video conferencing instead of audio conferencing. And one thing that you notice with it, because we do a lot of audio conferencing in our
Yes.
team, right? One thing you notice is that you cannot do what Ken was doing there, which is, the multitask, because you're used to being on a
wait, you
conference
caught me. Oh
No
call.
no, you
multitasking.
saw me. Oh no.
Yeah, tweeting, like checking out, the headlines and stuff. And when you're all looking at each other, you have to have showered that day and be making eye contact. So I think they said it definitely increases bonding, but it also makes people pay attention, because we've all been on those audio calls where you say, well, what does the team think, and every single person on the call is doing something else and not listening.
Or you hear
So
sudden rustling as someone's trying to unmute their button so that they can weigh
yeah.
in. But yeah, you make a good point. And in fact, we should probably talk for a couple of minutes about some of these do's and don'ts if you're going to be setting up video conferencing, because it's not something that you just want to sort of decide we're going to do video conferencing and the next day send everybody a camera and start trying to do this. It's got to be sort of throughout the company, the
Top
desire to do
down.
it top down, integrated. I think the word was ubiquitous. Everybody has to sort of buy into it. What are some of the do's and don'ts? I mean, we were talking about this before we went on the air about, like, okay, you've got your space set up. You don't want to be in your pajamas.
Right.
You don't want the dogs
So
barking. So I mean,
yeah, so they want to make it. I mean, if you're an enterprise, you're trying to get people to get on board with video conferencing. You have to make it worth people's while, which is have some value there. And like I said, have it be something where I'm meeting with my team members. We need to shoot down this project right away. It needs to have value. And it is a great way to connect with people that you don't normally team members who are remote or whatever. But then, just some of the basics, which is test all this stuff out, before
step
you
one, test.
start
Yes.
the thing up, because we've all sat through those things where, that you jump over to do a slide share, and we're supposed to be looking at the PowerPoint, and, everybody's screen goes out. And yeah, which, I think our organization's a little guilty of, we popped around to a couple different systems for those kinds of things.
Right.
And one thing is, work with your IT people, find a setup that's going to work for everybody in the organization, and then stick with that so that people get used to using the same, because otherwise you have a presenter saying, well, how do I mute everyone on this system? The other one had a different button. So consistency really helps. Pick something, get everybody set up on it, and then use it enough so that people are like, oh yeah, I remember what my password is. If you set everybody up and then you use it,
Once
three
every
times
six
a
months, you're going
year.
to
Yeah.
forget. Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So, and then,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
well, one of the other things I thought was really interesting out of that article with the do's and don'ts, which, people kind of forget, is the idea of excuse me, being too boring And especially if you have one person presenting to many, as opposed to, what we're doing is back and forth.
Right.
Like you need to, if you're just because you're the CEO or something and you're giving a quarterly talk, doesn't mean you don't have to say, hey, this is a visual medium. I need to look good. And I need to have, some slides or some animation, or, you just don't want a talking head. So I think people kind of forget, especially if you're at a certain level and everyone's kind of compelled to watch you, that you're on camera and you need to put on a little bit of a show.
Right. A PowerPoint presentation by video conferencing is going to be just as boring by video conferencing as it would be in real life. It's interesting too that one of the things that you're clearly going to have to do is make sure that people who are on video realize that they can't do what I was just doing with multitasking. For example, there were a couple of examples in that story where I think one video conference was going on and somebody was changing their kids' diapers in the background.
Right, the baby diaper.
Not
Nobody
a good
wants
one.
to see that. Yeah.
No one wants to see that. I mean, no. And then there was another one I think where some of the participants were like at lunch in a restaurant, and so some people were on the meeting and other people. Yeah, the clank of dishes and. Yeah, exactly.
Right, and
so,
just chewing.
It sounds like common sense, but remember, you're on camera and people are watching and listening for you.
Well, one of the things that they found is, especially if you're in a large organization, and then you're, a satellite office, is that everybody has sort of different levels of, what business casual means to them. So they really said if you're going to have some success with it, you start from the top, and it's like if you have, 5 guys in suits at the headquarters, and then, like you said, some people are sitting over there having lunch. It's like everyone needs to be kind of on the same page in terms of how, what the tone is, what kind of language you're going to use. We were just talking about the F-bomb, right?
Right.
So maybe you're in a very casual satellite office, but you're not going to start, dropping swear words to the powers that be. So it's kind of like they want the people at the top to sort of set the tone of like, this is how we're going to behave, in a video call. But you don't want it to be so formal that nobody says anything or, doesn't want to participate.
Ideally, if you've got somebody on camera and you can look at them as I can look at you and say, so, Tracy, what do you think?
Right.
They're going to be there rather than just sort of the silence that you get on the phone call if you're doing like just a
What I want to get rid of.
What's that? The silence?
The silence. Yeah.
Silence.
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody
silence.
have any?
And then
Pause. Yeah.
your microphone seems to be like, yeah. And we're having a tech. It just
Yeah. See, test everything
there
out.
you go. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I think that gives us a pretty good idea for what's going on in video conferencing. Out there among enterprises, it's gaining steam. There's many more hardware options at better price points. Companies that are looking to do this have to do some, due diligence and figure out what works best for them. And then once they've decided to go forward, get the hardware, test it out, revise it depending on what your company's needs are. Realize you can probably save some serious money instead of traveling and bringing people all around the world to meet. And then I think the last bit of advice was I had mentioned earlier, aim for ubiquity. Try to, you have this stuff going all the time, not just once in a blue moon when you have a company meeting.
Right.
Is my microphone working?
Yeah. Oh, I can hear you.
Okay.
Good. I would just throw out that it's finally accessible to any company. That's and you mentioned that up front that it's there's a middle level and there's a lower level now too, and I think that will put some pressure on prices. Getting involved in video conferencing now is a good idea.
All right.
Right.
So now that we've covered video conferencing, I presume no questions, producer Chris from Facebook. Good. Okay, we can move on to digital transformation. This is like the big buzzword. I mean, it's going to be part of the Agenda conference coming up in a couple of weeks. Companies are trying to figure out how do you integrate technology, how do you meet business needs with new technology, who's responsible for it. So, we thought it'd be good to talk about this for a few minutes. I know Scott certainly has some views on digital transformation and whether it's real or not. So I guess I should maybe turn to you first, Scott, and just ask me.
I think it's completely real. I just don't know how pervasive it is that we're chasing digital transformation. I think there are some companies in the van, and there are a whole lot of companies. Did that PricewaterhouseCooper thing study show anything at all?
Yeah, right. I mean, it was the I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but we're going to have them in our article. It was just a lot lower. They PwC had asked organizations to rate where they were on their digital transformation journey, and people were a lot lower than they had been, or where they were projected to be. Where they thought they were going to be, and it's not.
What I've been thinking all along is that there's a lot of hype to it. I'm not saying it isn't happening and it won't continue to happen. I just and I think it's really important for companies to move in that direction.
It seems like a lot of times companies have an idea for what they think digital transformation means, and then they think they're further down the road than they are. And then when they finally stop to take a look at what they're really doing and what's working, what's not working, and how to roll this out, they suddenly realize, wait a minute, we're not nearly as far along as we need to be, and what do we do? And that's where the issue comes up. There's a mismatch between what companies think they need to be doing, what they're really doing, and how quickly they can get there.
I think there's also just people don't quite know what it means. It means different things to different companies. Aligning business with technology and creating business value is the sort of gist. I mean, aligning isn't the right word because that's kind of a few years ago, but marrying, getting them in sync,
Connecting.
working together to create business value or even ROI is kind of the gist of it. Tracy, didn't the story that we did have myths? One of the stories.
Have what?
Myths
about.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we had, the definition is it's not just saying, oh, we're going to give everyone technology. It's actually, making all of your business processes, technology based. And the big goal that I think companies are not there yet is that's going to help you identify new lines of business. That's a huge priority for people is, opening up new lines of business
Yes.
with this. And that's the actual transformation as opposed to just saying, oh, we're digitized, right? It's not just,
We've got a website. We're digital now.
Yeah.
It's like,
So
no.
it's not automating or digitizing formerly, analog processes, although that's part of it. But it's really that next step is like we've now done all this stuff so that we can identify new lines of business. And so, for example, we have some videos that we're very excited to show people with people talking companies, Premier 100 IT leaders. So these are people who are at the top of their field talking about their digital transformation. And as an example, actually, Sigal Zarmi, who's from PricewaterhouseCoopers. So they're doing digital transformation on their own, for their own company, and then they're helping their clients as well. But she was talking about getting their employee population, no matter what they're doing, to a baseline so that they can start, utilizing this data that they gather to not just do stuff better, faster for their clients, but to say, hey, we can offer you a new service. Here's a new, analytics area that we haven't done before. So that's where you really get to transformation and not just, oh, we're automated, right? So I think that's what Scott's getting at is it takes a longer time than you think, and depending on your industry, if you sell widgets, you can make a better widget, but it's going to take you a while to identify new widget markets because there's still a lot of physical supply chain issues in there too.
The other thing I think is that, and we sort of said this, but a lot of people don't get to the line of business advantages, the increasing of revenue based on new ideas that bubble up in the company, or at least they're still getting there. You sort of achieve the back office transformation or, just digitalization, and you get waylaid and on the way to making more money. And I think that's the point where we need to help each other in this industry. we can help them by showing them and telling them how.
How to connect everything up and how to do it and make money at the same
Well,
time.
that
war.
they need to start now taking these technological tools that are aligned with their business and putting them together in new ways to make money in different ways. That's what they've got to do in order to get ahead.
It's interesting, too, that one of the things that seems to come up is that no one, or maybe it varies from company to company, but it's unclear who's in charge of the digital transformation. Is it the IT department? Is it the CIO? Do you create a new chief digital officer who's supposed to be responsible for it?
I think that's by design. I mean, honestly, I think Tracy will have a good point of view on this too, but I think it's depends upon the people in your company and
Right.
who has both of these things inside their head is who you start with, in my opinion.
Right.
Whether they're in IT necessarily or maybe some other part of the company.
I
They've got
mean,
to
you
have
want to
that
bring your
vision.
best minds from the business side, from the technology side, but if you've got someone who can encompass both of those things in one brain, you want that person advising or leading.
Right. Well, so, we're working on that debunking digital transformation story, and one of Mary Pratt is our reporter on that. She said, IT can't do this alone, even if you're supposedly partnering with the business, but you need it's not about, IT can help, but, or even, take a leadership position on this. But if you're trying to get at that transformation, you need people on board to say, yeah, we want to transform our business, our lines of business. And that's what the CIOs that we were interviewing were saying, is that their job in this was to motivate their employees, but more importantly is to get at what those, strategic business processes are, to say, how can we add value here? And you need to make sure that you're talking to the people who have the ideas to say, hey, instead of just selling widgets, let's, start a platform where people can design their own widget. That's that level, that next step up. But they have to, so you can't just have it be IT. You need to be talking to you need to be talking to operations. You need to be talking to the whole C-suite. And then the other important thing that I thought was really interesting, all these people that we videotaped, they were really talking about skipping up and down the hierarchy to really capture ideas and innovation. So it's not just you talking to your direct reports, it's going down sometimes 3 or 4 levels for people who are doing work that you don't have any way of monitoring otherwise, and then they can raise their hands and say, hey, this process takes a lot of time and it's full of errors and customers are mad. And that's where you're really getting, the value from it. So you need to have, everybody talked about having some kind of collaboration mechanism so that you can kind of capture that knowledge from different areas in the company, and not just you sitting
Video
there thinking,
conferencing.
Video conferencing. Yeah, there you go.
yeah,
Well, it's interesting too. You do in some ways need a champion or some way of, because I'm sure there are still employees at companies that are afraid of technology. And if what you're trying to do is transform your business, you need to have some way of making sure that employees can raise their hand or know how to raise their hand or what they should be doing or who to talk to if they've identified a problem. And you need to have throughout the company people who are helping employees literally get with the program, I guess, so that you don't get the resistance to digital transformation that might be inherent,
One thing that was really interesting, I actually can't name this source. One of the people we interviewed
Ooh,
was talking
okay.
about, doing this inside the IT department. And I said, well, how do you bring along, people who are, there's always kind of foot draggers or people who like what it is that they're doing now. And off camera, I said, gee, what happens when those people don't transform? And he said, well, they sort of this organization had a pretty top to bottom reorg in IT to, to be more customer facing and to have people doing solving business problems and not doing any of the keep the lights on stuff, which is part of their cloud strategy. And he said, well, we did have some employees who left.
Of their own
They
accord, or do we know?
Yeah, he was kind of.
Just saying, you might want to get with
Probably
the
yes.
program.
So, I mean, if you want to
Yes.
keep doing sysadmin and they are not having sysadmin be something that happens inside their organization, it was kind of, it's time
Right.
for you to look for a company that still has that position. So, and that's not even just in IT too, right?
Right.
If you're automating
Any job.
something, and I mean, so there is some employee turnover there, voluntary or otherwise, but and then also part of digital transformation is also automating a lot of things. And so you could be doing something more strategic, but you could also have at least part of your job automated out of there. So there's some considerations here. There's a lot of human impact.
Right. Not a surprise. Anytime you've got something this sort of amorphous, top to bottom, there's going to be some bumping and shifting around.
There's also a cultural aspect to this that I was surprised in the videos. More than one CIO talked about. We're going to post those videos
Yeah.
somewhere, right?
Yeah, we can post them now.
Okay, great. I mean, they were talking about how they had to start out with motivational, kind of approaches and different organizational structures. And I mean,
It's pretty big stuff.
it is pretty big stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
it
well,
can be
people don't
bigger than
like
the
change.
technology,
Yeah, people don't like change. And, especially if there's been a lot of churn in the last, I don't know what, 10 years, we've had it ourselves. You roll out a system and then you roll out another one. And so people have, especially in a work situation, they're like, I don't want to, have to keep learning all this stuff, although you actually do. But so there is a big, there is a sort of marketing PR angle to all of this, which is letting people know why it's going to be beneficial to them. Lisa Woodley from NTT Data, she said, do not come out to your staff and say, hey, we're moving over to this digital platform because we're going to save money. She was like, do not do that, because that's a company thing, but that's how does that help me? With my job, like, oh, I'm going to save money by having to move to a new platform. You're taking away the tools I've always used. So it really had to be showing whatever group of people you're trying to move, this is going to be faster, better for you. It's going to be less, iterations. It's, so you really need to show people in their day-to-day work lives why this matters to them, not just, oh, everybody get on board because it's good for the company, because we just don't have that much goodwill in us. We want our job to go well, our personal job.
And we want to continue enjoying our jobs, yes.
I know.
All right, great. Any other things we should sum up on digital transformation before we call it a day? I think we've given some pointers there about.
Yeah, we've covered it pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's just ongoing. Well, the other point in the debunking story is that this is not, it's not a one. It's not like you re-engineer and you're done. It's a really a constant process. And then, I mean, Scott, I know you were saying, well, what comes after digital transformation? I think, the answer is more digital transformation.
But
so you just,
the transformation
this is a constant
part.
role. Yeah. So we're on the bandwagon here permanently.
In other words, digital transformation is not a one-off deal. It's continuous and forever.
I guess.
Well, until the next fad
At
comes
least until
along.
something comes along. All right. Great. All right. Well, Tracy, thanks for beaming in from an undisclosed location somewhere on the East Coast. Scott,
my
thanks
home
for stopping
office,
by.
which I clean. So
yes, exactly. See,
does it look clean in the background?
It looks great. And no dogs barking.
No dust bunnies, no dogs.
Right. All right. And that's it. Thanks for watching. That's a wrap.